Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Tip of the Week. So we're continuing along with our cutout series. I apologize for a bit of a delay there, but I was at the Game Developers Conference last week talking to game developers about how we now have a gaming export from Harmony to Unity. So if you haven't seen that yet, then definitely go and check it out. We're very excited about it and working hard on that. So on the cutout series front, basically I would like to talk to you this week about creating basic effects. So when we're looking at a character rig, there are some things that we can do to make the rig look more pretty. So if we take a look at the character that we've been working on this week, then we can see that we definitely need to improve the areas where there's overlap. So I want to adjust the patches there on the joints on the overlapping areas. And we'd also like to do some masking. So for example, I'd like to mask the pupils and the iris here within the white of the eye. So those are the things that we're going to go after this week. And if we have time, then we might also talk about a little bit about Deform. And if not, then we can always leave that for next week. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to show you how to deal with the patches on the arms first. And there's a very handy tool here, or a handy effect that we can find in our module library that's called Autopatch. And whenever we're doing effects in Harmony or in Animate Pro, then we have to use this view over here that's called the network view. And if you don't see your network view already, then you can go ahead and open it up. We have been working in the network view already last week when we were sort of organizing the character hierarchies and things like that. So we're just going to really be continuing along within our character hierarchy in here and working from there. So if I want to find where the hand is, I can always just search for the hand by hitting the O key. O is short for center on selection, and it works in the network view when the network view is highlighted, and it also works in the timeline when the timeline is highlighted, and can be very, very handy. So basically what I want to do is I want to put the hand underneath the arm, but I want to have a copy of the hand, or a copy of just the fill of the hand coming back on top. So I want to kind of take the lines and erase the lines from the fill so that I can extract just the fill. And this is what the Autopatch does. But in order for the Autopatch to work, if we go ahead and take a look at our hand drawing, you can see right now that the hand drawing is isolated, or the whole thing is pretty much in our line art layer. And we haven't really talked too much about these sub-art layers because, you know, I like to try and keep things as simple as possible, and so I don't use the sub-art layers strictly all the time. I use them just when I need them. But basically these sub-art layers are sort of just within a single drawing. You have the ability to have different layers. And we have named them, so they're called overlay, line art, color art, and underlay. Now, thus far, if you just sort of keep it in the default place where things are is in the line art layer. But like the name suggests, you can keep the lines in the line art layer, and then you can take the fill and put the fill in the color art layer. And so I can actually just go in here and take my select tool, and if I go into the tool properties of the select tool, there's something called select by color, and if I turn that guy on, I can just click on that hand fill color on the inside, do a Control X, and then go down to the color art and do a Control V, and that has now pasted the color down to the color art layer. If you were doing this at the time of the creation of the drawing, you can also create your lines first. Then you can turn off that select by color mode so that you get your lasso back again. And then you can kind of lasso around the lines, and then you can do this option in here called create color art from line art. And when you do that, let's clear out the color art layer for a second here. So when I select these and I create color art from line art, then what it does, it just kind of creates these invisible lines in my color art layer, which I can then use to paint with. So I can take my skin color, I can take my paint bucket, or maybe even paint unpainted, and then I can just kind of drag around everything. And now I've got that painted in. And if you turn the preview mode on here, you can see them both at the same time, so you can see that it still works. So either way will work. But the most important thing is when the Autopatch, what the Autopatch does is the Autopatch takes the contents of the color art layer and it subtracts from the contents here the lines. And that way you get only the color that you need to have. And the reason that this is kind of important when you're working with pencil lines is, let me fill this in temporarily here so I can show you. What happens here with a pencil line is that the fill actually fills in through half or through to the center line. And so because the fill is filling to the center line, when you are using a pencil line specifically, then you need to have the Autopatch so that it can ignore the center line and instead it can figure out where the edge of the line is. The other super interesting thing about Autopatch is that Autopatch also works when you apply a texture to your line. So we don't really have textures on our lines in this project, but I'll just do one just for the sake of showing you what it looks like. And when you have a texture, you know, it may have some kind of a wiggly, bumpy kind of outside. And the Autopatch will subtract from that wiggly, textury outside from your color art so that you have the correct patch that you need when you're working. So Autopatch is definitely a super useful tool. So now that I've set that up, that hand up so that it's broken up into line art and color art, then I can just go into my network here. See how I slid my hand underneath the arm? So the hand is underneath the arm, and then I can grab the Autopatch and bring it in, and I'm going to put the Autopatch on front. Now here's a little trick. You may not know that you can drag more than one pipe out of the end of a drawing. So if I just, drag more than one pipe out the back, then it's basically bringing a copy out. But I can bring this copy into the Autopatch module and then bring the output of the Autopatch into the front. And wow, it's like magic. So now my hand has been fixed. The Autopatch is just doing miracles, and I don't really have to worry about that. Looks like the pivot point might be slightly off there for that drawing layer, so I might want to go back and adjust where the pivot point is, but the Autopatch does work. So mission accomplished. So you can definitely make use of that Autopatch wherever else you might need to. Similar thing going on here with the bracelet. I remember when I drew this bracelet that I drew part of it in the line art and part of it in the color art. So I guess I did do a little bit of this. I'll show you guys a little trick here as well. So let's keep this as organized as possible. So for the bracelet, I've got the majority of it going, or the whole thing going in front of the hand, and the hand is right here. So what I want to do instead is I want to kind of copy and paste this bracelet module, and I want to attach it to the same peg so that they animate together, and I'll put the copy underneath everything. And so what I'm going to do there is I can then go into the properties just by clicking on this yellow options box. I can go into the properties of that module, and in the drawing tab is where you can choose which ones you want to show. So I can choose to show only the color art in the one that's behind, and then I can go into the one that's in front and show only the line art. And then that gives me kind of what I wanted. So I may want to go back and kind of adjust exactly how that works. But you see what I was kind of going for there, that I wanted to have the ability to rotate this thing. So it looks like I kind of need a little bit more, a little bit extra artwork, or maybe I'm going to pull it apart slightly different. So if I take a look at these two here, maybe I'll grab some of the lines from the color art and then put them into the line art in the front, like so. And maybe I'll grab a few of these guys from the front and I can take them to the back. So that's probably going to work a lot better. There we go. So now I've got a bracelet that goes in the front and in the back. And I've seen this method, excuse me, I've seen this method used with socks on the feet, or when you're putting the foot into a shoe. You can have the shoe have the sort of lip of the shoe that goes in the front on the line art, and then you can have the rest of the shoe in the back with the color art. So let's just check our shoes here. I've just set these shoes up as two different layers, so that works pretty well for me, so I'm not going to change that. But you could do that also. You could do that concept also with the shoe. Okay, so for that Autopatch, I'm going to do a similar thing here with the hips. So I can just go into my network view, search for the selection, and I'm going to put the hips actually behind both of the legs. And then I'm going to put the Autopatch for the hips in the front. So let's grab our Autopatch. and stick the auto patch into the front, in front of the front leg, so it goes right there. And then I just need to go back and make sure that I have split up the hips into the two different layers. So I'll go back and use my little trick with the select by color, and then I'll just pop that in the back there. And now we see the auto patch is working. So super easy. It's like an automatic patch. And I'll quickly do the same thing on the other hand. Now, since I have set my character up so that it's got clothes and the clothes are all in separate layers, I am going to just take a couple of minutes here to fix the clothes and put some auto patches on the clothes as well, and then I'll speed up through this section. You may sometimes also get into a situation where you'd like to use the Overpatch module, but you still want to have a line that appears when those two layers are overlapping. So the way that I like to do this is still by using the subart layers, except I just copy the line that I want to use for the overlap from the line art layer into the overlay layer. And then I go in there and I make a really nice point on the end of the line using the pencil editor, and I select that and get the point looking nice. And then the only thing you have to do then is make sure that you take a copy of that overlay layer and you bring it into your scene where you can see it. So this is starting to get a little bit complex looking here, but see, I have this sweater arm here, and everything always wants to be attached to the same peg so that when you animate it, they all animate together. And so when I look at the sweater arm, this one is actually the overlay. And you can name it that way as well, so it only has the overlay turned on. And I put a composite module here just to gather together all of these auto patch, overlay kind of things. And then I put them so that they're leaving my group, because I had a group for my arm to keep things still relatively simple. I had a group for my arm. So if I want to composite them in different places, like I want the arm to be underneath the body, but I want the overlay stuff to be on top of the body. So I can actually create a mini composite here. And it's always, as usual, a good idea to set this one to pass through. And then I can just drag into the multi-port out. And then when I leave the group, then we see now there's a new port that shows up in the outside of this group. So what I did was I connected the arm behind the body, but I connected the overlay stuff on top of the body. And that way I can still have a line where they overlap, but I can make use of that nice Autopatch. I can use that nice Autopatch to be able to get that overlapping of the joints. Okay, so now I've got all the auto patches done on the body. I did some auto patches on the hips there, on the wrists, and then I had a bit of a more complicated setup on the the torso and the arms because I did all these clothes. So if you do it all as one body part, then it would not really be an issue for you. But since I had all these clothes inside the arm group, I had to have the auto patches that I wanted to go in front of the body, the auto patches that I wanted to go behind, and then I had to kind of, create these composites to get them all grouped together. And I can probably even simplify this a little bit more, just getting rid of that one there. But, just try and keep it as simple as you can while getting the effect that you want. So now we're going to take a look at how do we deal with the eyes, because this is something pretty much everyone has to do. So what I'm going to do is a very, very similar kind of a thing. Let's just get these other pieces a little bit further away so that we have a bit of room here. So basically what I want to do is I want to use the auto patch again to extract out the white of the eye. So if I go in my eye layer, then I basically want to keep the brown lines or the eyelashes on the one layer, and then I want to take the white of the eye and put it in the color art layer. And that way what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to use the same auto patch to generate the difference between the two. So I'm just going to generate the difference, but I'm going to kind of use it in a different effect. So what I want to do is I want to take that difference there and I want to use it to plug into a mask. Let me teach you another quick trick here. When you're trying to double check what you're doing and you want to kind of just see what it is that you're looking at, then if you go into all modules, you have the ability to add something called a display. And there's a default display that you see at the end of your network. If you go out to top, at the end there, this display is what's displaying what you're seeing in your camera view. So in the majority of the time, you want to see the final image that you're going to be looking at. But sometimes if you're trying to troubleshoot or you're trying to understand how your network works, then you might want to attach a display module halfway in between and just kind of look at it. So if you right click in the gray area at the top or you go to Windows and Toolbars, you can turn on the display tab and you can switch to this other display. So I just did this just to show you what I'm getting out of the auto patch here. What I'm getting out is I'm getting out the white of the eye minus those eyelashes. And what I want to do is I want to use this as a mask for the iris. So there's a very good tool that we use all the time, an effect called Cutter. And so the Cutter, everything in here is alphabetical, by the way, so if you can spell, which I can't always, but if you can spell, then you can just figure out very easily where they are. And then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and slide it into the iris there. Now, whenever you're dealing with a module that has two ports in it, always the left-hand port is the mask, and the right-hand port is the original image. So the original image here is going into the iris, and I want to take the auto patch there and plug it into the Cutter. And now if I go back to the regular display, you see it's doing something. Maybe it's doing the opposite of what I want though. It's masking off the iris with the white of the eye, but it's masking it in the wrong sort of place. So if I go into the Cutter module, I can simply check inverted, and now it's going to mask off that iris and keep it inside, which is super, super useful and quite easy to set up. Okay, so now that we got that eye working, we'll do the same thing quickly on the other side. So I'll just first start by moving the sides out to give me a little bit more room. Remember, we'll just have to go back in here and adjust the drawing so that I can get the white of the eye onto the color art layer there. And then I can do the auto patch. And I'm going to plug the auto patch into the Cutter. That will be slid into that iris there. And don't forget to invert the Cutter. And there we go. All done. Now some people will take this concept and apply it also to the features in the face. If I want to, I can have the facial features cut off with the edge of the face as they rotate around. And I'll just do quite a simple example of that now. So the easiest way to do effects that you have going into multiple different things is to gather them together into a composite. So I want all the facial features except the nose to be sort of affected by this. So that means that I need a composite in here that will be for all of the facial features except the nose. So I'll just add an additional one here that I can do like so. There we go. And now on these ones, I'm going to put the effect, the cutter effect. Now the only tricky thing is I need to plug something in there to the facial features. And what I want to plug in there is actually the head. So I can do this little trick here where I can take a copy of both of these elements and I can paste them inside here just to make it a little easier. You always want to make sure that they're attached to the same peg. So on the outside they're connected there. And then I can use this as the cutter there for the face and then invert the cutter. And if necessary, you can also set up an Autopatch on that if you want to keep the line work on the outside. So I don't really mind that right now, the way that it looks, but you can see as you start to move it over to the side that you may want to keep the lines. So if you want to keep the lines, then you want to just go ahead here and make sure that you separate the line art and the color art on the head layer, just like we're doing with everything else. And then now that those are separated, I could use an auto patch. And then just put the auto patch into the cutter. And there we go. So now I've got the facial features being cut off, but I separately have the ability to sort of animate these guys within that face there for those cool effects. So that's the basics of masking and doing cutters and joints and things like that. The last thing that we'll kind of set up here on this character, which is kind of an effect, is the way that we're going to handle the deform. So I'll just do a simple deform on a couple of these elements and then let you guys play around with deform on your own. For me, I find deform to be really, really useful these days. Most people are doing it on just about everything. And there's two different types of deform. There is a curve style deform, and then there is a bone style deform. So we'll start by putting a curve style on this, what do you call it? What have I called it? The lace. Yes, this lace. So you always want to start by clicking or dragging where the movement is going to originate, where it's going to start from. So it's going to start from the top here. When you do a curve style, you can take your rigging tool and your setup mode, like so, and then you can drag. So I'm just going to drag down like that, and I can drag back up from the end. And I don't really want the deform affecting that last little bit there. So, and then if all looks good, I can actually just leave setup mode, switch to my transform tool, and start animating right away. Wow! And if you need to go back in and make adjustments on your rig, you can always go back to setup mode. And within setup mode, when everything looks red, this is where you can take your transform tool now and start to make some adjustments. But I don't need to make any adjustments on that, so I'm going to leave that one as is. I'm going to also do an example of a bone on the arm here. So when you're doing a bone, instead of doing a drag, you're going to do a click. So I can click at the top, I'll click around the elbow there, and then I'll click again at the wrist. And I don't need to have a bone for the hand because I'm just going to swap the hand out. I don't intend to bend or warp the hand, so I'm just going to leave that like so. And then if I leave setup mode and go back to the regular mode here, you can see how that's applying to that arm there. But maybe it's not quite 100% perfect yet because a couple of things. I want to have the movement be followed by the hoodie and the other elements there. And I want to have the hand follow the movement. So let's go ahead and select the arm there and go into our arm group. And we can see now where the deform was added at the top there. It's added in between the drawing layer and the peg layer for that drawing. So what I can do is I can either copy and paste or kind of directly make this a child of those other elements like the sweater arm and the hoodie sleeve. And as I do that, you'll see that those other elements will now also bend and warp with it. Now lastly, I want to also add the ability to have the hand follow the movement. So there's this trick in here called create kinematic output. It's called kinematic output because it's going to follow only the kinematics, only the movement of the bone without being warped by the bone. So if I create that kinematic output, it adds the additional port there, and then I can use this port to connect to the hand, which I actually think I put over there somewhere. So let's connect that right in there to the hand. And now I can try to move my arm again, and you see that the hand follows. And then if the bracelet were a child of that hand, or if they were both following the same, let's say instead if I took that into that hand there like so, then you see that it's going to move both of those drawings together. Now, so far so good, except for the fact that things are a little wonky here around where that articulation is. And I do want it to kind of bend and stuff, but you can see, first of all, it's not doing so bad a job, but something's getting left behind. And if I kind of zero in there on what it is, then it's this additional hoodie sleeve thing that's just kind of hanging out here in nowhere, and it's because somehow that got disconnected. So once I connect that back in, then it's good to go. And so that's working pretty well. The only thing I may want to do is adjust the size of that articulation. So I may want to go in here and make this a little bit bigger. And so I'll go back into setup mode, and then I'll just make that joint there a little bit bigger. Now the only trick is when I do that, I want to kind of copy the resting position back to the current position so that when I leave setup mode, I don't get wonkiness. And now as I bend that, you see that works pretty darn well, especially when you have clothes on. So you don't have to worry about all of those additional kind of, what's going to happen when I rotate my arm stuff. So I hope that gave you guys a few starting points. I'm going to finish up my character here by adding Deform on the legs and on a couple of the elements here in the body, and then we'll finish up there for today. Also, hair is another really good thing, by the way, to have curves on. So if I'm going to add some curves in the hair, even just doing something as simple as this, and then I can animate it around like that. Wow, it's like just so easy. I mean, the world has changed since Deform. It really has. Like all of our customers are using this now. It's not like something unusual to see being used in the industry, and it really makes your life a lot easier, but it also allows you to kind of animate at a higher quality as well, because you can start to do things that you may not have done before if you didn't have the ability to create all these new drawings. Because now we can just kind of animate this stuff without having to create a million new drawings. It means that you have extra flexibility to really play around with your character rigs and to start doing some fun stuff. You still have to keep in mind things like overlap, making sure there's overlapping drawings. Here, that neck is maybe not long enough. You also want to keep in mind where you want the deform to start from. If my fixed point is where this sort of hoodie attaches to the jacket there, and I want to put a deform on this, then the fixed point should always be where you start your rig from. So you could do something like that maybe, and that would give you the ability to go in there and kind of animate this up and down or stretch it out or whatever it is that you want to do with that. So there you go. You can see how just after a couple of minutes of working there, you can really get some cool effects in your rig, all the way from doing masking, cleaning up the joints, and lastly adding deform for that final touch. So next week we will complete the cutout series by talking a little bit about some animation tips. And that'll be it for this. And then stay tuned after that. I will be doing a series on specifically creating rigs for games, and then how to take the game rigs, animate them, and export them out to Unity. So stay tuned for all of that, coming as quick as I can bring it to you, really. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.